Trevor and Catherine had been married for 3 years, and at first, everything on the career front seemed to fall into place, at least on the surface. Catherine moved from one job to the next with surprising ease, always landing on her feet, discovering fresh prospects just as soon as the old ones began to feel stale. Trevor's journey, however, was a bit rockier. He often clashed with his supervisors, and though he switched companies a handful of times, it wasn't because he was chasing growth like Catherine was. More often than not, his exits were the aftermath of ongoing tension with upper management. Still, he never let on to Catherine what really happened. Instead, he wrapped his explanations in vague statements and half-truths. As time passed, Trevor's patience ran out. The constant job changes were making themselves felt, and he began to take out his frustration on Catherine. This wasn't always intentional. Sometimes he just talked about a difficult day, like how he was framed by a colleague, or how he watched a key client leave. But the more he talked, the clearer the pattern became. He was convinced that the whole world was out to get him. From his point of view, every boss went beyond what was allowed. No one recognized his value, and he was always treated unfairly. At first, Catherine listened patiently. She offered support, even tossed around a few suggestions to help him move forward. But Trevor didn't budge. He refused to reflect or make any real changes, digging in his heels with the belief that the problem was never him, it was everyone else. About 6 months after Catherine heard the same complaints, her interest began to wane. Their conversations about his problems at work reached a dead end. No breakthroughs, no plans, no progress. It's all the same. But then, one evening, everything boiled over. Trevor came home in a foul mood, storming through the door with another tale of injustice from work. Kate, already drained from a day spent wrangling a particularly demanding client, just didn't have it in her to listen. All she wanted was a little peace and quiet. But Trevor, oblivious to her exhaustion, launched straight into his usual rant. And this time, something snapped. Without even thinking, Kate cut in. The weight of months, maybe years of bottled-up emotions came rushing out. She told him, flat out, that maybe it was time he stopped pointing fingers and started looking in the mirror. But instead of hearing her, Trevor fired back with sharp words of his own, his pride too bruised to recognize her frustration. What started as a tense exchange quickly spiraled into a full-blown argument, both too tired, too raw, and too stubborn to back off. That night, they didn't share a meal. Each ate alone, the silence between them loud enough to echo. Days passed, then weeks. Their conversations became stiff and sparse. Neither extended an olive branch. Trevor, deep down, knew he'd pushed Kate too far with his constant complaints, but pride kept him from saying sorry. And Kate? She'd already written it off as his fault and preferred not to dwell on it. She distracted herself, telling herself she was too busy to revisit the fight. But life, as it often does, threw them a curveball, one that would turn everything upside down, especially for Kate. It happened at a birthday party for a friend they both knew, surrounded by their usual crowd. The drinks flowed, the music buzzed, and for a while, the tension between them faded into the background. But as the night wore on, someone asked Trevor how work had been. Still simmering from a fresh conflict with a colleague, he dove into the story, sparing no detail. Kate, sitting beside him, let out a tired sigh and half-heartedly glanced at her phone. Then, out of nowhere, Alyssa, one of Kate's closest friends, walked up and cut in with a single sentence that sliced straight through the noise. "How does she still put up with you?" Her voice wasn't loud, but it was sharp enough to cut glass. She must have caught the tail end of Trevor's rant and decided she'd heard enough. Trevor turned to his wife in shock, searching her face for a reaction. But Kate just sat there, pale, unreadable. "What's that supposed to mean, Alyssa? Maybe think before you speak," he shot back, his voice tight with anger. Silence fell around the table like a thick fog. No one dared say a word. Feeling exposed, Kate suddenly stood up, grabbed her bag, and mumbled that they should head home. Trevor followed, shooting a cold glare at Alyssa as they left, though she didn't even flinch. The car ride back was suffocating. Not a word passed between them, but Trevor's mind was racing. He couldn't stop wondering, had Kate been airing their dirty laundry to her friends? Was she already thinking about walking away? The thought unsettled him more than he was willing to admit. Why had she reacted that way? Why rush to shut her friend down so quickly? The more Trevor thought about it, the more uneasy he felt. Alyssa's words had clearly struck a nerve, and not just with him. Kate's pale face and abrupt exit spoke volumes. And that silence on the drive home? Heavy, loaded, unnatural. Was she hiding something? Was Alyssa's careless remark actually closer to the truth than he wanted to admit? The thought gnawed at him. Trevor couldn't shake the growing suspicion that maybe Kate was already slipping away quietly, privately, perhaps even emotionally involved with someone else. He told himself he was just being cautious, that it didn't hurt to pay closer attention. So he started watching her a little more carefully, listening a little more closely, waiting for anything that might confirm or disprove his fears. And it didn't take long. One weekend, with nothing much to do, Trevor found himself idly scrolling through a well-known social media app. He browsed the usual people you may know section, a mix of distant acquaintances and mutual friends. Most of it was familiar, nothing out of the ordinary. But then, one profile jumped out at him. He didn't recognize the name, but the profile picture was eye-catching, vibrant, colorful, unmistakably curated to grab attention. Curious, he clicked. What he found wasn't a typical page filled with memes or vacation selfies. This one was different. It read like a personal journal, short reflections, scattered observations, little notes about everyday moments, written with a distinct, thoughtful tone. And something about that tone struck him. He couldn't quite put his finger on it at first, but as he read more, the words began to feel familiar, uncomfortably familiar. One particular entry made his stomach turn. The post was vague, nothing explicit, just a brief complaint about someone who constantly plays the victim while dragging everyone else down. But the phrasing, the way the sentence was structured, it echoed things Kate had said to him before. The rhythm of the sentences, even the choice of punctuation, it all felt like her. Still, there was no name, no photo, no direct clue. It could have been anyone. He kept scrolling. And then, he saw it. A photo, subtle but intimate. Taken from the passenger seat of a car, it showed two hands clasped together. One clearly belonged to a man. The other, unmistakably, was Kate's. Trevor froze. The tea in his hand went cold. For a moment, he simply stared at the image, hoping he was wrong, but no. He knew that hand. The bracelet. Even the curve of her fingernails. There was no mistaking it. His mind began to race as he flipped back through the earlier posts, cross-referencing dates and details. The timelines lined up a little too perfectly. Certain phrases, once vague, now seemed loaded. The more he read, the more convinced he became. Kate hadn't just written about him. She had been doing it for a while. And suddenly, Trevor's suspicions were no longer suspicions. They were facts he couldn't unsee. Why had she needed a second account, an assumed name? The answer now seemed all too clear. Kate had already dressed up, carefully done her makeup, and stood by the door, ready to head out supposedly to meet friends. Trevor kept his expression neutral as he kissed her goodbye. But the moment the door clicked shut behind her, he made his way to her laptop. Luck or carelessness was on his side. She hadn't bothered to log out of the other profile. With a few quick clicks, everything was laid bare. There it was, the truth, unfiltered. A long thread of messages with someone named Max. They were flirtatious, bold, and disturbingly intimate. Kate wrote about upcoming meetups, about desires she clearly never voiced at home. And then came the final blow. She wasn't going to see her friends that night at all. She was meeting Max. It was in that instant that Trevor felt something break inside him. Not a snap, not a scream, just a quiet finality. Their family life had ended, and there was no coming back. He didn't call her, didn't confront her right away. Instead, he took the rest of the evening to act. He sent a message to their son, Danny, just a few carefully chosen words, enough to say what needed to be said without dragging him into the chaos. Then, Trevor calmly gathered Kate's things, the dresses, the shoes, the handbags she loved so much, and dropped them all in the hallway like discarded relics. And then he waited. When she returned later that evening, laughing from the hallway until she stepped inside, the scene before her stopped her cold. Her new outfit strewn across the dirty floor, the air thick with something she couldn't name. She didn't need to ask. She knew. "What the hell is this?" she barked from the doorway. Trevor stood, his voice suddenly sharp and cold. "I know about Max. I read everything. And a woman with no respect for herself or her family doesn't belong here. Especially not as my wife." That hit her like a slap. But instead of remorse, Kate's face contorted with fury. "At least he's a decent man," she snapped. "You know what kind of company he's built? We became regional leaders this year. You want to know why? Because he doesn't sit around whining about life, he does something." And just like that, it all clicked into place. Max wasn't just a fling. He was her boss. The one who'd kept promoting her. The one she'd been with all along. Rage gripped Trevor. He attacked her. And after everything turned into screams, accusations, and slamming doors, he threw her out. The next day, he filed for divorce. For a while, Kate tried to hold on. She rented a small place near her office and went back to work like nothing had happened. Eventually, she made her move, hinting to Max that now, with no husband in the picture, she was free to imagine a future with him. But Max had no such intentions. He didn't sugarcoat it either. He wasn't interested. And worse, Kate soon learned he was already seeing someone else. The humiliation was quiet but brutal. She didn't make a scene. She couldn't. Instead, she handed in her resignation with trembling hands and tear-filled eyes. Despite all her qualifications and experience, something inside her had dimmed. She stopped trying. She stopped caring. People whispered that she'd ended up in a hospital, treated for severe depression. Trevor never confirmed it. He didn't reach out, didn't ask. He simply vanished from her story, just as she had from his. But deep down, he knew. Whatever life Kate had imagined with Max had never happened. And whatever she thought she'd gained, she lost far more.